Working on Battle for Middle-earth 2 is really cool because it goes into new places in the fiction. So you've got the war in the north, new locations, new creatures, new heroes. So we've unlocked the fiction in a way that is just terrific for the people working on the team who are passionate about Lord of the Rings and for consumers as well.
The most fun part for me was deciding, all right, what characters from Lord of the Rings can we put in this game, and what cool stuff can they do?
It gives us a little bit more freedom to add in our own ideas of what things are supposed to look like. So we try to keep them in the same universe, in the same world. If you look at, say for example, the Mountain Giant, we tried to design him to look something like something that would be related to the Troll, or used the similar look, the same anatomy style, but still give it its own life.
The Lord of the Rings fans are going to get to see a whole new land, a whole new battle, and we're going to take them along through a story that leads you through this. And the cinematics are a part of that additive with the game. You're going to move along through a story that has dramatic build and content.
It was a real joy trying to sell Tom Bombadil. The day we showed him in our Leeds meeting, you know, he gets summoned, there's banjo music, he starts singing, running around, kicking butt, and everybody just busted out laughing.
It's very exciting when you see the ruined city of Fornost come to life in front of you, when you can go to Dol Guldur, the fortress that Sauron had up in Mirkwood, and actually see it. It's a visualization of something that's never been visualized in a game or on film.
We had Galadriel cast this tornado, and it just starts whipping units around and flying them all over the map. That is going to be fun to play with right there.
So this time we've got dragons that we didn't have last time and that you didn't see in the movie. We've also got key characters from the books like Dane and Gloin and Glorfindel that weren't really in the movies but are really important to the books. So it's fun having those kind of heroes to play with this time.
I think War of the Ring mode will really appeal to Lord of the Rings fans. It's 38 total territories. All the territories that are in the single-player campaign are represented in our mode. All the great missions and battles from the first game and from the movies like Helm's Deep and Minas Tirith are available there.
Our studio has a monthly studio project review, and that was really the first time that we showed our fortress building mechanic, where you could customize fortresses and you could pull out walls and you could really build something pretty unique. And you know, one of the EPs was just like, wow. He's like, that was awesome.
Motion capture is a process where we capture the movements of a real human being and incorporate them onto a 3D character model for the game. Is we take an actor and we put him into a suit that has markers at different points of the body. And they have cameras surrounding a stage floor, and the actor will take direction from, in this case, me. I'm the director for motion capture, and we have him perform the moves that we want the character to do in the game. And the cameras pick up those motions, send the information into a computer, and we can pull that data out and apply it to whatever character we want. We can use the same actor to be a dwarf, or for an elf, or for a mountain giant. So one of the units that we used motion capture for this time around was the Mountain Giant. And the actor we used is a guy named Paul Lazenby, and he's the kickboxing champion of Canada. So he was a really big, tough guy, and so we said this guy's perfect to be our Mountain Giant. And some of the stuff that went on the studio was great. I had a lot of fun working with him as a director and getting him to get into the role of the Mountain Giant. So when we got early on shooting his moves, we had him, you know, punching at the air and doing the moves we wanted him to do, but it wasn't giving us the impact we wanted. So we got guys come out with big pads to give him targets so we could see that motion of him impacting with something. So we had this kickboxing champion from Canada, and you know, these motion capture computer geek guys with with pads, and they're flying all over the studio while this guy's crashing into him. We even had one of our own producers get up there with the pad, and he got knocked around quite a bit, but it was a lot of fun, and we got some really cool motions out of that. Afterwards, after we got the data back, I got to go into there with the motion capture data that we had and animate his fingers and his jaw. So we still get to add on some fun animation on top of what we get from the motion capture.
We wanted to do a set of visual upgrades. We knew that we wanted to bring up the graphical look of the game because we had been looking at some of the competitors.
Our role at NVIDIA is to work with developers such as the Battle for Middle-earth 2 team to make sure that, you know, their games look as good as possible and run as fast as possible on our 3D hardware.
I remember an early meeting where I would sit down with some of our graphics engineers and with Ofer Eslin, our visual upgrades development director, and say, you know, we need to get our visual our visual appearance better.
The development team has been extremely attentive. They viewed us as somebody who can actually help them.
One of the things in real life that have been most difficult to render in real-time 3D graphics has been water.
Ofer would sort of look over at me and he's like, you know, we'll make the visual appearance better, but we want to make it best.
We've worked very closely with the Battle for Middle-earth 2 team to ensure that they make the best use of hardware features on NVIDIA hardware to make the water look as good as possible. Some of these features are shader model 3.0 capabilities on graphics cards to get more realistic looking waves, also more realistic looking refraction effects and reflection effects. These very, very subtle cues are very important to making the water look as realistic as possible.
And you know, Ofer and his guys, they just went and they just rocked and they rolled. And you know, all of a sudden, it's like, hey Chris, you gotta check this out. We have new water. And you know, I knew they were working on water, but you know, I'd walk in and be like, holy cow, that's crazy.
Some of the other graphical features in Battle for Middle-earth 2 would be use of bump mapping or normal mapping for more realistic per pixel lighting. Another really, really important aspect to realistic 3D graphics is the employment of high quality shadows. And that's another area where use of 3D graphics hardware can significantly increase the visual quality of your title through the use of fast shadow mapping techniques and shadow filtering techniques, which also use shader model 3.0 type capabilities.
Part of what we're doing this year that's really significantly different is really working at the emotion of telling a story, because people haven't been to this northern land, in the theaters, and we're now, creating a whole new look of a new place. And so each cinematic is moving that story along, and they're all unique in their own ways. One of the biggest improvements in the cinematics is this improved camera system that we designed. It allows us to make much more fluid moves. We can work a lot more quickly. We can preview things a lot more easily. We are using a camera system that's built into the engine of the game. We're not doing this in Maya Max or some other format. We're working in the game, and that's one of the things we're really proud of in this game, is that the visuals in the cinematics are the game. They're not some other created fantasy that is separate from the look of the game. My favorite cinematic is the high pass intro. You're up in a new snowy environment you've never seen. You see a giant that you've never seen before. This party is coming up, a really desolate, cliff, and the camera swings around it. And then this shadow rolls across the scene. I mean, it's just, got a lot of drama to it. One of the new processes we've initiated this year is a transition between artwork and cinematics.
One of my favorite pieces of art on the project is the painting of Dane and Gloin outside of the Erebor fortress. That was the painting that really said to me, we can do these cinematic sequences with these paintings, and they're going to have so much drama that people are going to be as excited about them as I am.
We really love classic artwork, and Tolkien's work has always had many, many illustrators doing these beautiful paintings of these lands and creatures. Well, we've got the best artists doing that, and we're making these magical transitions from those paintings into a moving sequence. It's really a classical moment.
So much of organizing a game development effort like Battle for Middle-earth 2 is worrying about the assets, literally worrying about every little detail, every little thing that our customers are going to see on the screen.
We took a game like the Battle for Middle-earth 1, which already had 4 big factions in it with all the units and structures and powers associated with it. And we wanted to make the Battle for Middle-earth 2 feel like a really new and bigger bigger game. So we have 6 factions now, which results in hundreds of units and structures and powers.
And just sort of getting your head wrapped around that effort, getting your head wrapped around what it takes to sort of organize those assets into work bins or into lists of things that people can start executing on. That's hard. There's a set of organizational principles that we're actually trying to pioneer here at the EALA studio that revolve around the concept of pods and, in particular, cells.
In the past, we'd traditionally broken the team up based on discipline. So there would be an engineering department, art department, designers, and then production and development directors kind of oversaw all of that. This year, we focused more on a feature-based approach. So we would take a specific feature of the game, like all the units and structures, the create a hero, the user interface, and we take anybody who had to work on that, whether it was an engineer, artist, or designer, and we have them all working together in a group under one manager.
So you look at something like create a hero. That's a meaty feature that you'll find in Battle for Middle-earth 2. And we've got an engineer sitting in there with an artist and a producer, and together they're saying, look, we're responsible for this feature. At the end of the day, if the feature sucks, it's on us. If the feature's great, it's on us. They know that they're empowered to make that feature as cool and as kick-ass as it can be.
The initial concept of create a hero is, okay, well, let's just give the player a chance to sort of put himself in the world of Middle-earth.
So as a player, you can ask yourself, if I were a hero in Middle-earth, who would I be? What would I be? Would I be an elf magic user, or a warrior, or even a troll?
Just was so interesting an idea that we went into equipment and all kinds of special powers and all kinds of different races.
And then customize the appearance of your hero with armor, weapons, helmet, pretty much any way you want to trick out your character visually to essentially express what you want in a hero in Middle-earth. And then you customize their powers and abilities, which actually changes up gameplay.
Taking your customized hero into a multiplayer battle can change the whole dynamic of the game. Players won't know what they're facing right away, so they'll have to be careful.
Amir Rahimi, who was in charge of that feature, he just went crazy with it. It turned out to be really cool.
So what you have is the ability to create your own custom RTS unit, and that is cool.
The thing I think I'm most proud of this time around is the broader palette we have in the game compared to the first one. Just the locations that we go to and the diversity of those locations. Last time we had a lot of green grasslands that were like Gondor and a lot of kind of golden grasslands that were like Rohan. This time it's a way broader palette. We've got snow levels, night levels that have snow, water levels, a lot of game levels where we're using the post effects and the lookup tables to get the kind of muted bleach bypass look that you see in a lot of Peter Jackson's films. Just after we'd created the Goblin Fortress, the Goblin architecture was a really tough challenge artistically. In the movies, the Goblins don't have any architecture. They take over Moria, they take over dwarven strongholds. And so we were kind of building the look of their architecture out of their armor from the movies, because that's really the only place we had to start off from. So we were creating this architecture for them that was all spikes and rough metal and rust and stuff. And it was so new that I wasn't sure it was working. And we'd created this really interesting looking Goblin Fortress that was built out of all this spiky, rusty metal. And my worry was just that it was so wild that people wouldn't feel that it fit into the world of Gondor and Rohan. And then as soon as people started seeing the game, the first thing that they keyed on was what a cool fortress that was, and how it had this big rusty metal dragon rising up through the center of it. And that's when I knew we were onto something.
War of the Ring mode is completely separate from the rest of the Battle for Middle-earth 2. It's entirely turn-based, so it plays out a lot like Risk, the board game. We drew the map on a paper game. We had little chess pieces that you could move around, and we iterated on that design. We invited other team members to come and play it and give us feedback, And we took that feedback and we tried to improve upon that paper game as much as possible before ever writing a single line of code.
It was going to be a simple little board game that allowed you to move around through Middle-earth. And it ended up being this sort of, it's still simple to play, but a much deeper and richer experience than we expected.
It's the one opportunity in the game where you truly get to control all of Middle-earth. The entire world is split up into 38 territories, and your overall goal is to move from one territory to the next in an attempt to defeat your enemy. And the first person to kind of conquer all of Middle-earth wins. And you can do things like build structures, build up your armies, move your heroes throughout every turn. The real exciting part about the game is that you can fight either in an auto-resolve fashion where it just takes 5 seconds to determine who the winner is, or you can actually dive down into the map that's associated with that territory. So if you were fighting Mirkwood, a territory that was never seen in the films, you can, and you actually fight an RTS battle in the Mirkwood levels.
In multiplayer mode, these games can last weeks online, and we're very excited about that.
When we decide to create a level or a mission in the game, the first thing we do is determine where it's going to fit in the story. We decide what our campaign story arc is going to be, and we spend a lot of time crafting that. We pick a point in the story that we think is going to make a fun level, and then we take that point and we create a real short synopsis of what it might be. Let's say Mordor attacks a town on a river in Dwarven territory, and so that would be our Kelduin mission. In that point, we give it off to one of our designers, and what he does is he takes it and he writes out an entire mission battle plan. And that includes, okay, what kind of units are we going to put in here? What kind of structures? What kind of terrain do we have? Time of day? What kind of powers is Mordor going to use against us? Are they going to use the Eye of Sauron or the Rain of Fire? And then he lays out the map. He draws it out. And then once he has that sorted out, he creates a mission outline. The emotional beats of the mission. When you start off the mission, the town's already under attack and it's already on fire, and you have to find all of your friends in the midst of all this fire, gather a strong force of dwarves, move on, create a base, and then attack the beach and assault the Mordor base. And so we go through a number of iterations. Once he comes up with a basic concept, we have to decide, all right, well, where does Navy fit in? Or do we get to use artillery, or are we just getting bombarded the whole time and have to attack them with cavalry? And we spend a lot of time iterating and going over this. And once we're done with the battle plan, he gets to jump right into world builder. We have artists making specific art for the mission, engineers giving us unique gameplay elements, just scripting out everything. So the dwarves are where they're supposed to be, the artillery is attacking us when it needs to be, and we spend a long time just making sure that that's iterated to perfection.
One example of how we're adding depth of strategy without losing accessibility is how we're transforming the base building experience for RTS. And what we're doing is combining 3 fairly simple mechanics that when you put them together create almost infinite possibilities and unleash a tremendous amount of creativity and strategy in how you play. We're letting you build anywhere you want, anywhere on the map, any structure, and there's a tremendous freedom that comes with that. But that just gets us to where every other RTS game is, and we're coming up with 2 innovations that kind of transform base building. The first is walls. And yes, other games have done walls, but not quite the way we've done it, in a way that's very accessible, very easy for the player to access, and extremely powerful, because you can lay down a wall quickly and easily and then upgrade every segment on that wall with a defensive upgrade like a trebuchet or a tower that shoots arrows or axes, depending on which side you're playing. The final piece that kind of comes into the mix is the upgradable fortresses that are kind of the heart of your base. You can put all kinds of upgrades on it. You can put trebuchets, arrow towers, buildings you can garrison. You can build wall hubs that you can then build walls off of and extend around your base. If you're playing some of the other factions, you get all sorts of interesting upgrades. Ents that are captive to the fortress, giants and a little turret throwing rocks at opponents, and then you can upgrade the fortress by giving it essentially bonuses for the troops that are nearby, and then a central monument which gives each fortress for each side a very special power.
It was really interesting how I got involved with EA. It was kind of on a whim, in a way. I bought Battlefield Middle-earth 1, was really excited about it, started playing online, Liked the whole ladder setup, hit up a couple communities and realized there wasn't a tournament site.
Community for any game is important, especially for an RTS game.
So something that's been important to us from the very beginning is working with the community. And it started all the way back in the early part of this year when we brought somebody in and dedicated them to serving the community. And this is something that was kind of new to our team, and it was a first step in establishing a relationship with the community that goes beyond what we had before.
I really didn't know who to contact or anything to get it going, but I was determined that I wanted to start a tournament site.
So we brought somebody on. We had them actually available to the community, supporting the game through multiple forums, multiple sites on the internet.
So happened, came across a forum post by Aaron Kaufman. I just said, hey, I didn't know what he did at the time. I didn't know who he was, but I sent him a little message, and I got an email back, and he was excited.
NVIDIA and Electronic Arts, we sponsored a community summit where we brought 30 of the top guys who do all the websites and all the mods.
So where we brought 30 people in who represented fan sites for a whole range of different products.
Not just from the BFME community, but from CNC, Age of Mythology Planet, quite a few different sites.
We showed them everything about the game, listened really carefully to what they had to say, and actually made significant design changes as a result of that feedback.
And they listened. I mean, they took our comments at hand and really shaped this game around what the community thought it should look like.
Even the head of the studio came by multiple times just to say hi and say, what do you think we should do with this game?
And that sort of relationship with the community has continued ever since that first community day, where we listen carefully to what people are saying about the game, and we try and make sure that we're addressing the desires of the community as we're building the product, keeping them up to date with what we're doing.
It was really obvious the community was important, and to make this more of a timeless game rather than just something that is on the shelves for a month or two and then goes away.
Our support for the community is certainly unprecedented in my experience, but it's a standard that we hope to maintain in the future.
Well, we have a pretty good rapport. There's a lot of brotherhood, among the designers, the artists, the engineers, the sound crew, you name it.
On a daily basis, I would say that my biggest challenge is not hurting myself on the team scooter.
We have our Medieval Fight Club. A lot of the designers do that. It's been this long-running thing that we've been doing, where we take up our sword and our shield, and swords are made of like carbon fiber wrapped in foam, so they hit pretty hard. And we get out there on the field and just beat the stuffing out of each other.
We even have foam rocket wars in the hallways. Sometimes you'll be working and you have to duck because a rocket goes flying by your head.
So trying to not get hit in the head with a foam dart while sitting at my desk is a very big challenge.
What's the worst thing that can happen if an engineer sitting in his cube and all of a sudden, biff, gets knocked in the side of the head with a foam dart? Okay, so he spins around, collects up his own stash, he goes out, and for 10 or 15 minutes, he's in a dart fight.
I've been hitting the head with a dart from 50 feet away more than a few times.
I actually had my glasses knocked off my head the other day.
Comes back, sweaty, huffing and puffing. Is there a cost for that? Sure. I mean, he was distracted, now he's got to get back into his work. But being able to say, yeah, I work in a place where I can get biffed in the head, with a dart by one of my best friends, that's someone who's engaged, who's happy. I mean, that's someone who wants to be here, and I think that really describes a lot of us. I think that really describes exactly the sort of work environment that a lot of people in the game industry are thirsty for and want to pursue.